Okay, sorry, just testing the audio. Let's see if this is getting through. Looks like we're streaming. Let's see if I'm getting any audio at all. Okay, come on, audio. Oh wow, even for the air conditioners, actually sounds pretty good. All right, I'm going to start in a second. Oops, I don't want full screen, do I? No. How do you make it? Boy, you used to be able to get the comments and everything without crap. Yeah, where you can't see the comments no more. All right. Well, if you're here, you're here. Allegedly, if you type it in the chat, I'll see it. That restream chat relay thing's supposed to work. So I guess welcome to episode 25, dropping in at Pipeline Audio. Let's see. So first of all, some of our newer kids bands, Lenore Mollison with Iron Lotus, they were playing a show today. Actually, the show that I wanted to get the Behringer XR18 for, but they didn't end up using it today. It wasn't feeling too good, and I'm probably going to wait till I have some lighter monitors and everything. The point of this one is, it's kind of like when the Random Weirdos used to play through the Reaper Live setup with the computer. They need to use electronic drums, and so it's a good chance to be able to control the volume of everything. And I'd rather they didn't even bring guitar amps, or if they do, small ones. And I'll be running into the XR18's amp simulator, which has some cabinet simulators, which are fine. I'm going to figure out how to get that working a little bit better. But so that part looks good. But it's amazing. When the Random Weirdos were 8 years old, we started teaching them how to use PAs and set up everything. And these guys are all in high school or out, and they don't really know how to set this stuff up. So we did it pretty light. The Alto TS210 was all you really needed for the vocal mics. Seemed to be fine. I did that last week. Last time it was open, it's once a month. And that worked pretty good. And so, I guess I just got to get them learning how to use that stuff. So what I really want to end up, and maybe you guys can tell me what's good for this. I was thinking I was going to get something like 5 of those Alto TS210s or whatever. Get 2 for the mains, and then the drummer's going to need a monitor. Tonight we actually used the SWR Working Man, the old really loud 10 with the horn. But I figure I put one of those next to him, and I put 2 kind of in the front where the singers are, so they can hear themselves, and so the guitar players can hear themselves. And if the guitar players really want to bring some amps, they can just point them away from the crowd somewhat and point them at themselves so they can hear. But this is one of those cases, in most cases, you don't really want all that much noise on stage, right? You don't want that much SPL and stuff leaking into all the mics. And in this case, the audience is standing right there, and so we're trying to keep it quiet enough to make it work. So I figure getting them into the monitors, if they don't, they all have pedals and junk, but if they have an amp, I just take the line out of that, and it should work with the, I got all kinds of pedal boards. I'll figure out something, but so those Harbingers are a little bit cheaper. So are they okay compared to the Altos, or should I just get the Altos? I've had the Alto for like a year or more now, and it's been awesome. So perfectly happy with that one. So what do I need to get? The XR18 has tons of DSP, so that makes it pretty easy. Okay, looks like everybody's coming back from the show, so I'm going to go check on that real quick. So if you're in the chat, sorry, I'll be back as soon as I can. And if you're not, how in the world do you get the Facebook chat to work anymore? Like, I don't even understand. So do I just throw a comment? Let's test it. I'm testing the Oh yeah, it works actually. Okay, never mind. But it's hard to see. You can't see the whole conversation if you're still watching the video. You know, that kind of sucks. So yeah, I'm still using the restream replay thing. I'll be right back. How'd that go? Okay, sorry, I should be back in a little bit. So how do you see who's in your thing, man? This sucks. Oh, there we go. All right, anybody who's still with me, sorry, I had to go put some stuff away. So here we go. So here's some more quora stuff. How do I soften K and C sounds in my audio in Adobe Audition? I think Adobe Audition can run VSTs like anything else. And so, you know, the obvious ones are going to be like compressors, but it's going to, especially a compressor with look ahead, assuming that latency isn't really an issue. You could just set a slow attack with the compressor or a slow release. Or I've seen people use an expander to kind of gate out the beginnings of stuff. But usually if it's plosives, sometimes it's easier just to split the audio. I have a bunch of different commands in Reaper that split it different ways, where it's like some of it automatically crossfades, some of it automatically overlaps. Really depends on what you're doing. Sometimes you just got to get rid of it. And it really isn't as much terribly long work as you might think to just go through by hand and split everything. It's not always that bad. But, you know, I'm sure somebody's got a better answer than this. Just nobody seems to yet. Let's try this one. Okay. So, why do many large digital recording studios still feature huge analog consoles? I mean, you guys already know my answer, right? For the most part, it's because they want to look a certain way. Or they might have clients that expect to see that. Or they may, they may be used to working that way. I know it's really hard ergonomically to stop using faders if that's what you're used to. The plus sides for me let me get away with it because I just hated consoles breaking on me all the time. So I'd put up with the maybe the lack of ergonomics, but that's what I think anyway. I think, if they're used to it, they're going to still use it. Many of them have probably convinced themselves that it sounds better. They're probably the same guys that think that they hear the differences between mic preamps and stuff, and will never give you any evidence of that. They'll just state it. It's just bald assertions. There's a couple good answers in here. I think this is fallacious a little bit. Clients, especially older ones, will want their tracks to have that analog sound. I don't think there's really an analog sound. I mean, there's different sounds that you can make with different analog gear, but there's no real analog sound as far as I can tell. Oh boy, let's see if I can get this one. How do you fix earbuds when they only work on one side? Well, that's why I say probably the most important tool you can have in the studio, important piece of gear, is a soldering iron. And then after that is a multimeter with the continuity checker, right? I mean, if you have those things, you can probably fix it. If the speaker's bad, that's one thing. But most of the time, it's just the connector that's going to be broken. And so, find out. It's lots of times it's those molded connectors, so it might be snapped there. You might have no hope of actually fixing that, but it'd be good to find out. You can do it with a pin. You stick a pin in the where you think the signal wire would be at the earphone end of it, and then try and see if you can get continuity to the tip or the ring, depending on how the earbuds are wired. But to where that side's signal is actually supposed to come from on the jack itself. So you might have to go do some Googling depending on what kind of format it is. Like if it's just old analog headphones, you'll just have an 1/8 inch jack or a 1/4 inch jack. Tip will be one side, ring will be the other side, and sleeve will be the ground for both of them. So both wires will share a ground. I will be right back again. Sorry. All right, sorry, I think I actually will be left alone now. Let's see. Okay, so this next one was... Do studios use the Shure SM7B? And you know, this part of this question is funny just to see the B. Like whenever you see noobs talking about stuff or true believers, you'll always see the B on the end of that. But back in the day, we just called them SM7s, right? But now it's like SM7B. But lots of people do. Some of those Sacred Reich vocals were Shure SM7s. You'll see these all the time on broadcast. Allegedly, they have really low output, but I've never actually had a problem with that. That actually brings up something. We had a lot of talking about the cloud lifters and things like that. I figured that those things are just going to add more noise than just turning up the mic preamp, unless your mic preamp's really weird that gets really bad towards the top, which I don't know. Maybe that's true. I don't know. I'd like to hear more about it. We had a pretty good debate on it, but no hard numbers. But yeah, studios use a Shure SM7B. You know, we used to use it on snares a lot. Now that all the noobs and posers and true believers treat this as some kind of supernatural legendary mic, the prices have gone way up. You used to be able to get them for peanuts, but not anymore. But they're still good. There's nothing wrong with them. And you know, one of the funniest things about these is you'll never see one without the foam screen on it. And any other time when people are talking about mics, they're gonna tell you that, oh, this foam screen in the way, it totally destroys it. You know, and there's actually people who buy like hundreds of dollars microphone screens. I forget the name of these things. Let me I'm just gonna Google this. Let's see what happens. They call it pop filter. Let's see if I can find it. There was one that was like insane money. I mean, this blue one is pretty expensive at $70, but yeah, there's a Neumann one that costs $110 and looks like the same as all the rest of them. But there's some that are like insanely expensive. But anyway, I'd worry more about your song and your performance than the foam being in the way or the pop filter giving you crap. But the SM7 is definitely used a lot still. Or I don't even know if I should say still. Okay. Why do sound engineers need so many knobs and buttons to record a song? Because they're knobs? I don't know. You know, back in the day, it took you didn't have these digital consoles where you only really needed one control surface and it's kind of be a duplicate and you just bank to everything. Back in the day, you could mix. I mean, there was tricks to it, but in general, you could mix only as many sources as you had channels for, and sometimes you needed a lot. I mean, we did a lot with 21, 22 tracks. I did tons of albums like that, and that seemed to be plenty. But nowadays, I'm piling. I see, man, I got stuff to mix that's like 60 tracks or more. Sometimes I just turn it down. I'm like, there's not really adding anything, but in the old days, the only people who had the really, really high track counts usually were the film guys, because they would have each channel would only be used for one sound. It might only be once in the film, so you needed these gigantic things. But it's not so much that you need that many. Nowadays with the DAWs, you just you need whatever knobs you need, but you don't really need these gigantic consoles anymore. But you might want one. Okay. So here's, what is the cheapest microphone someone could use to record screaming vocals without it sounding awful? So of course, 3/4 of you out there are going to say that any screaming sounds awful, but in general, you need something that can handle the SPLs, the sound pressure level, and all this religious, supernatural nonsense about microphones. They do sound different than each other, but they're not, if the same type of polar pattern of microphone, there's not really functionally different than another one. You might have noises and problems, but assuming it was done well, they're going to be pretty close. So, I mean, I'd go give a Behringer XM 8500 or whatever that thing's called, the Imitation 58. I'm sure it's fine. I get screamers in here all the time in Sennheiser 835 or 935. I'm not sure which, all the time. And then, of course, 58s. They're using 58s for that all the time. It's fine. Sometimes you get the guys singing into kick drum or tom mics, like, he has a 421 sometimes. If they're going to hold them, that becomes a whole nother issue. You got to figure out a way that they can hold it without it making too much noise. There's some mics out there that are really meant to not have that much handling noise, so it might be a good check for those. But cheap, just get try an 8500. Try any of those cheap dynamics. They're I'm sure they're terrible, but or they're going to say it. But you may have seen me do a video where I just took a drum set of mics that were $100 for these pile mics that had a kick drum mic, snare drum mic, 3 tom mics, and 2 small diaphragm condensers. And you go watch those videos; they sound great. And I mean, sure, there's lower noise. There's some other things, but this is one of those things where if you can't make a decent recording with those $100 mics, the $1 million mics aren't going to help you. And, well, this is funny. Here's a kind of a related question here. Is the Shure SM58 a good studio microphone? Yeah, I mean, it is. It's got a presence peak to it, so it's got a different EQ curve than like a 57 would. But I use 58s on all kinds of things. You can use them on snares. You can pretty much use them wherever you'd use any other dynamic mic, with whatever it is, a hypercardioid pattern or cardioid. They act similar, but it does have this presence peak to it that kind of makes the singers pop through. So that might give you a little bit of grief, but it's still a great effect, great microphone. Okay. So I'm kind of moving through these quick. I'm sorry. I don't have much time tonight. So this is the example of the fallacy of poisoning the well. I forget what there's an actual fallacy. Let me see what it's actually called. So click, 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 click. I know there's a real Roman name for this thing or something. Anyway, this is an example of when did you stop beating your wife? That kind of thing, where they're assuming a bunch of things in the question itself. Let's see. This guy says to commit a preemptive ad hominem attack against an opponent. That is to prime the audience with adverse information about the opponent from the start in an attempt to make your claim more acceptable or discount the credibility of your opponent's claim. Maybe there's affirming the consequence or something. I don't even remember. But this guy asks, why is the Fender P bass the best studio recording bass? What do you mean by best? I can't stand those things. If you're doing slapping and popping, you're gonna hate life on that on the P bass, I would assume. But it's so common that people would be pretty much used to EQing it, compressing it, everything else, so that it's probably a good safe sound, like a Marshall 800 or something. I would take a lower noise, better built bass if it was up to me, but I could see, this is one of those things that just inspires confidence in people. If they expected to see a P bass, you better have a P bass. A lot of traditionalists are gonna like them no matter how they stack up against a better bass, and they're going to play better. Just because it's technically a better instrument doesn't mean that the performance is going to be better. People play what they want to play, and I could hand one of my scalloped guitars to somebody that doesn't want to play scallops, and it's going to sound horrible, even if his guitar is just some busted up old thing with super high action and buzzy frets and stuff. He's still going to sound better on his guitar than one of mine. So, but yeah, the question is ill-formed, It's not the best studio recording bass. It's it's something you can use. I wouldn't, okay. I really don't understand all this worship of the Fender and Gibson stuff as if there's something special about what they're doing versus anything else. I mean, I hate to break it to anybody, but, on an electric guitar, the, basically your sound is a motor. You're almost like doing an alternator, except for, it's the strings breaking the magnetic field rather than the magnetic field whipping around a thing of iron or whatever. You're making a motor. You're moving metal across the magnet, and you're generating electricity. And then there's, the playability, like the fretwork and stuff. And man, there's a billion. I mean, are you going to say that Fender and Gibson have good fretwork? They might have okay fretwork, but you can get some killer stuff out there. And taking any guitar to a good luthier and having him do your frets, it's going to annihilate anything you'd normally buy. Maybe the custom shops or something have a better ones, but it's just weird. Like, you can get, just because it has the name on it, it doesn't mean that it's going to be better. It might be a lot worse. I don't want a noisy single coil crap thing. I don't want a tremolo that has like some flimsy little bar on it and so hold in by 6 little wood screws on the guitar, and a bolt-on neck missing a couple frets. I don't want any of that, So yeah, I don't know. That's my Fender Gibson whatever traditionalist rant. Oh boy. So this one, I want this open. Okay, I don't know why this isn't opening. What are some affordable ways to build a singing studio at home? Well, don't listen to me, because we went and built one of those DAW bench isolation booths, and that thing is killer. But there's nothing cheap about it. It's gonna cost you a ton. What is it that you're trying to do? If you don't have any neighbors or anybody else in your house, then you don't have to worry about your noise affecting them. And probably you, in that kind of situation, you may not have any worry of other people's noise affecting you. If you're far enough out there, it just doesn't matter. The isolation side of it, unless maybe there's some wind noise outside or something, but in general, that's where people are going to spend the money, is on the isolation, sound getting out, sound getting in. And the other part of it is, if the room is too small, if the room is too big, you can get a bunch of, might be really cool sounding reverb, might be fine, but you might be getting echoes you don't want. And you won't have that good of an idea of what it sounds like, because if the room's too big and too reflective. But the main problem is when you're going to be in small rooms and you're just building up all these mud modes. If you ever get a chance, go Google room modes and understand acoustics a little bit, and you'll see why a general room is such a problem. One of the things that people do is you can easily put things up that absorb the higher frequencies, like the foam everybody sells. That'll take out the high frequencies pretty good from bouncing back at you, but it doesn't do anything for the lows. So you're just building up mud, and now you're taking away all your clarity too. So right now, if you're in the United States, Home Depot and Lowe's have 15-inch by 47-inch, I think, by 3-inch Roxol Safe and Sound for like $60 a bag. And I forget how many pieces come in a bag, but it's a lot. And if you can stick those in something, pillowcases, whatever, sheets, and ring those around your singing area, you're going to have a pretty good sound. So that's going to munch on the low end just as much as the high end. It won't necessarily get the super, super lows, but you probably aren't singing those anyway. And it does attenuate them somewhat. It also attenuates the high frequencies, at least as good as foam, as far as I know. But mainly it's more of a balanced attenuation. So, find a way to get some of that rigid fiberglass into around your area. You could put it right on the walls and then cover that. I don't think you want that exposed, but if you put it on your walls directly, it's not quite as effective as if you have a little bit of an air gap. But that's kind of how I would do things. If you can't afford that, just big, huge things that absorb bass. I've seen people do really good vocal recordings just using pretty much bed mattresses turned on their side, and it actually ends up sounding a whole lot better than I would have thought it would. So that might be a way to go. There's a lot of stuff you'll see in DIY, maybe in YouTube or whatever. But then again, there's a lot of misinformation out there and a lot of nonsense. A lot of people trying to take your money, and a lot of people who mean well but just don't really know what they're talking about. Let me get one more. So acoustic guitarists, when recording, what kind of microphone do you prefer in terms of kind of diaphragm and such, not specific products, and why? Most of the acoustic sounds that I'm known for, I did an MS microphone setup, and what I like to do is find the middle of the guitar, which if you're standing in front of the guitar, have the guy play it, and then kind of rock back and forth, left and right, and find out where the actual stereo center seems to be, because it's not where you'd think. It's not in the middle of the guitar. It's not in the sound hole. Often it's behind the bridge, which sounds bizarre, but it really is true. And then I'll put, I'll try, if I have one of those stands that keeps the guitar from moving that they can play on, that's when I really love it. But even if not, I put them pretty close, man, honestly. I might be 3 or 4 inches from the guitar. It's really close. And the person playing, the breathing, their nose pointing down is actually a problem for this. So sometimes I make them wear painter's masks, which, it's not nice to do for very long. But generally I'll have the M mic and the M and the S mic. So you got one mic in cardioid pointed right at the stereo middle of the body. And then you have another mic in figure 8 that's 90 degrees from that mic, but just about touching if you can. And then you decode it. I made a little decoder in Reaper for that, but there's tons of MS decoders. There's special MS mics like the VP88. I haven't really gotten that one to work as well as two large diaphragm condensers, multi-pattern ones that are purpose-built. I've seen the CAD M179, which is like a really cheap multi-pattern microphone. I think it's large diaphragm condenser. I've gotten those to sound really good for doing MS. But a lot of people like small diaphragm condensers and aimed, in a different place, kind of a spaced pair or just aimed at different parts of the guitar. I've done it. I get okay sounds. I kind of like the sound of, the end of the neck, right where the neck joins the body, pointing a small diaphragm condenser. But again, I put them pretty close. I probably put them a lot closer than people would be comfortable for. Just a couple inches away. There's probably some proximity effect going on. What I always look out for, though, with these small diaphragm condensers and kind of spacing them out and stuff, is there's kind of a fluty sound that I end up with if I'm not careful. And again, this depends if you want a stereo sound or not. So the MS is great for the stereo stuff. Plus, it collapses easily to mono. As all it does is just remove the sides mic, but you may not want it stereo. You may want it mono. And then the other thing is like, what's this thing supposed to do in the track? A lot of those ones people talk about that I did were actually 12 strings, and they're meant to be zingy, zingy, zingy. So it's really close up there. And it's meant to be stereo. It's meant to be wide and gigantic and just not even way larger than life. It's kind of ridiculous, actually. But is this thing like it's like a foundational instrument? It's kind of behind the vocals. It's not really meant to poke out, but it's just providing a lot of the meat and the actual notes of the song. You may not want it to be that to pick up that many highs anyway. And a good way to get this is just put a dynamic mic, just a regular old cardioid dynamic mic, and just put one of them on there. And what I like to do is move them forward and back while the song's playing, and because of proximity effect on the dynamic, you can get it boomier or a little bit duller, depending on where you put it, and you can usually find it. This is one of those things like we had one of these shows where we talked about, I like to record kind of the way it's going to be mixed. So I want to use zero latency plugins. I've already got kind of what processing I'm going to do on it. And so I already have an idea of what the song's going to sound like in the end. So I can just move the mic forward and backward toward the guitar and hear kind of how it's going to fit in the mix. So that's a good way to do it. And yeah, I think this was, again, sorry, this was a super short one, but I had a long day and I couldn't really get to anything earlier in the week. And I'm still waiting to get Jim Roseberry on here. Sorry about that. So I'll see you guys next week.